And welcome back to the second half hour of the Factor Uncensored. Thank you for joining us and sticking in there with us. Now, an important issue, autism in children could be more common than you think. According to a new study, autism rates in children have tripled in New York and New Jersey. There isn't a medical test for autism, but researchers say the numbers of diagnoses have gone up from 1% of the population in 2000, reaching 3% in 2016. Let's bring in my next guests who are here with us on the Factor Uncensored, Doctors Avis Smith and Kimberly Demby. Glad to have you here on the Factor. Do we know why, Dr. Smith, why we're seeing an increase, and we're more specifically targeted at New York and New Jersey, but why would there be an increase in those areas?
So what we're having to take into consideration at this point, there is an increase in the use of screening tools utilized in order to be able to diagnose autism spectrum disorder. So what that looks like is as you're going in infancy, parents are getting the opportunity to complete these screening surveys to be able to identify developmentally where their kids are falling. And what comes along with that is just the tracking of these characteristics, these traits of autism, where ultimately is leading to diagnoses of autism.
And Dr. Demby, is there a possibility that there have been parents out there who have been in denial and decided to say, okay, let's deal with it, we're going to get diagnosed, and let's address the problem?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we know that, you know, mental health stigma is still a thing. And, you know, when people hear the term autism, that really does weigh heavily on a lot of people. And so definitely I've seen in my practice when I've had to render that diagnosis for someone who meets diagnostic criteria, parents a lot of times do go through a grieving process. And you know, sometimes make the decision.
Do they ever get pushed back to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sometimes, yeah, it does happen. It's like, no, this isn't right.
And how do you walk them through that to get them to accept reality?
Yeah, so I always talk about, you know, I really frame autism as a matter of neurodiversity, right? And so it's not a deficit. It's not that your child is less than, it's just they're different. Just like me being left-handed doesn't make me less than a person who's right-handed. We're just different. This is just a different way that your child's brain works. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're modifying the environment so that it can best support your child's brain and so that they can have a good quality of life.
And Dr. Smith, what I meant to do was establish this in the beginning. For those who are not clear what autism is, break it down as simple as possible to them.
Okay, so autism is a developmental disorder where it's marked by socialization challenges and issues. For some individuals, it can impact communication skills as well as how they process information. And
give us an example of how it could impact a person.
So, for example, socialization-wise, which is one typical characteristic, it doesn't necessarily always present itself in that way. However, individuals struggle with creating and the maintaining of relationships. Especially you can see with children, sometimes they struggle with being able to interact with their peers, and they tend to want to interact in isolation where they don't want or don't necessarily feel that they fit in with their peers.
And Dr. Demby, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. How do you get parents to understand that and explain why it's not the end of the world?
Yeah, you know, and again, I always come back to talking about it from the neurodiversity perspective. And I think now the beauty of us having these open conversations now about mental health and having so many autistics who are actually like on social media and talking about their stories and their experiences, I think that's really powerful. And so I try to expose parents and even some of the kiddos to, hey, this is someone who is like you. These are your people, essentially, and they're still living these full, thriving lives. So why can't this be the same way for you?
And Dr. Smith, dealing with it in the Black community, is that much more difficult? What are your thoughts on that? Because, I mean, I've lived a day in my life, and we've had family members that's Aunt Jessie who's special, and no one's doing anything about it. So talk about that.
So I get to look at it from the vantage point of twofold. I am a parent of a son who is 6 years old, and he's on the spectrum, as well as I'm a mental health therapist.
Now, were you already focused on this when it happened, or did you focus on it after it happened?
Well, due to my background, I observed the signs. I knew what those signs looked like. So I monitored them, and I expressed to the doctor the things that I was
sorry,
saying.
I meant your expertise. Were you already an expert in this field before your child was born?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What are the chances, you have to ask yourself?
Right. And so when you're looking at it, to go back to that question with the whole Black community, that's the thing. We have the tendency within the Black community to label behaviors and things like that as, oh, that they're just a bad kid, or those behaviors are just, they, you know, whatever. But at the same time, we're not considering the fact that there may be underlying reasons for the reason why their children are responding in the way that they are. We have a tendency to make excuses, especially if intellectually those kids are to par. We don't take into consideration that there may be some other underlying issues that may be presenting themselves. Mm-hmm. So with families, there are often times where there's pushback, where there's nothing wrong with my child. Mm-hmm. And we're not saying that there's anything wrong. They're just process information differently. And that's the one key thing that we have to hone in on and focus on. They're fully capable of living the same traditional and typical lives as any other individual. We just have to make sure that we're putting that support in place for them in the different areas that they need it in order for them to be successful.
Yeah. And it's almost like there's nothing wrong with your child. She or he may just need one extra teacher.
Exactly.
Like in elementary school. Where can people go really quick for help? Where can they go and find the assistance they need?
I think it would depend.
Or who do you reach out to? I'm sorry. Which professional should you reach out to if you need help or assistance?
So if we're talking about in terms of initial diagnosis, typically that falls in the wheelhouse of a clinical psychologist. So we do all of the testing and everything to be able to formally diagnose that and tease apart other differential diagnoses. A very common one, for instance, ADHD, OCD. If they're looking for therapy, then definitely you know, a licensed professional counselor or mental health social worker would be a good bet for that as well.
All right. Thank you both for joining us here,
Yeah.
Dr. Demi and Dr. Smith. Still